Okay. We are, just in case anybody ever asks or is wondering, I always go live. Not always, most of the time I go live. And some of you will see this after the fact when we post it. So we're going to be talking about several different things today. Actually, there's been a reversal. There's been a reversal in the Villages market. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about historical average sales price and see where we've been. We're going to talk about how July was one of the worst Julys that we've seen in many years. So we're going to talk about that. And of course, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat section. Love getting those questions. And if you have any comments, look forward to that too. Of course, by the way, I put my email address here. This is the first time I think I've done that. That's my email address. So if you have questions, some people like to text, call, some people like to email. So if you want to email me any questions there, for the folks that might be new to the channel, my name is Glenn Stein, obviously from the email. I'm the broker at Realty Executives. We've been in existence in the Villages since 2004. Late 2004 is when we moved into our building across from Laurel Manor on 466. So for the people that are local to the Villages, you know. And you also know that we've been the number one MLS company pretty much for the last 18 years. So really excited about that. We've got some great people that work within our organization. Super proud of that. As you can tell by the ticker, we're looking at inventory count coming down to 218, which is the lowest we've seen in quite a while. We've been hovering in that 220 to 240 range. So a little bit of inventory coming down. What we've seen in the last week, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the macro. I mean, the first thing that we've seen is inflation numbers come down a little bit, which is always good news. And I won't be cynical about that. So try not to be too cynical about things, but a little bit of an inflation, and I don't remember the numbers, but they've come down a little bit. I think it was like a half a percentage, half a point. I think we're right around 8.5, if I'm not mistaken, inflation numbers from the last count. And this was coming out on the Wednesday. If you're really curious about it, came out on Wednesday, and you can Google that. Also, seeing interest rates go down. And I think it's affected the marketplace, and that's why we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in inventory. So the market reverting back to and going actually a little bit in reverse, I think is pretty much based on we're no longer in July and interest rates going down. And in the people that I'm talking to around the country, very similar conversations where the market's picked up a little bit, but still a lot of folks are feeling like it's pretty quiet. And the reason for that, there's a big reason for that. If we look at the numbers from the month of July, and I've done this study not only here in the Villages, but across the country. Almost every market is like this. But specifically here in the Villages, what we're seeing is that less sales in the month of July, right? And by a good margin. And we haven't seen these numbers since 2017. So low in sales. But the one thing we have seen is we've seen an increase in average sales price, So over the last X amount of years, of course. So let's take a look at, we're going to look at these numbers right now. So if we look at the numbers overall, you're going to see that the ranges. So if you look at the 2017 numbers, 239,000 to 265 and everything in between is basically what the average sales price in the Villages was for MLS in 2017. 2018, we saw an increase in average sales price. And then 2019, the same thing. Let me blow this up for you so you can see a little bit better. So these numbers show that, we've gone up. So let's take July, for example. That's the last month that we just completed. Look at 2017, 248,000. In July of 2018, 272. 19, a little bit of slippage there to 262. And of course, that was a lot of people don't remember this, but interest rates were going up during that time period. And, so there was a little bit of a slowdown in 2019, especially the first part of that year. Then, of course, 2020, where things just started to go bananas, we're seeing an increase, 283. And then 2021, even more so. Last year, 336. And then this year, look at the numbers, 429,520. So literally we've seen what would that be? That'd be probably about a 70% increase from 2018. And if you go back all the way July, let's see, a doubling actually happened right at, looks like July of 20. Let me scroll up. That looks like 16, 15, 2013. So a doubling from 2013 to 2022. We've seen a doubling in the month of July. So that is something that's very interesting. So it gives you an idea of what's happened, in our marketplace, average. And actually, let me show you on a graph. This will give you another perspective as to basically what we've been seeing. So if we start looking at, the graph portion of things, look at the chart, and the chart shows you the increase here, right? Like that tells you this is a really good description of all the numbers you've been looking at. Just kind of the long run up. So we're going to change this a little bit. So now let's shift over. So the one thing I do want to show people, I think that, that's the good news for sellers, maybe the bad news for buyers, and the good news for buyers and the bad news for sellers might be the July numbers I was sharing with the number of units that actually have sold. But let's take a look at, we're going to look at the number of properties that have sold. So we'll look at so I'm going to share this with you so it give you a really good perspective on the data. Okay, that chart's very interesting too. So we're looking at MLS numbers, and we're going to look at the month of July, and this will help everybody really get an idea of what we're looking at. Okay, so we blow this up, we look at the July numbers, and you're looking at actually better than I thought, not too bad. Actually better in June, obviously, than I thought. And look at July's numbers, 112 sold in July. That's actually half the number of 2021. Okay, so half the sales. Now, 2021 is an outlier, obviously, because we've never seen a year like 2021 as far as the run up in the number of properties they're actually selling. So I think that's an outlier, very much like maybe 2019 is an outlier in the very beginning, because you're looking at 79, 92. Look at those, how little, look at the number of units that sold. But 112, as I was saying before, was actually the lowest number in July since 2017. But in 2017, these are very typical numbers. And we saw 2017, actually, that's probably the year where the Villages turned into a more of a mature marketplace where the numbers were actually a little bit more consistent. And then 2018, definitely more mature. 2019, we saw a really dip, beginning part of 2019, saw a big dip. Then 2020, of course, obviously through the, COVID times, and then the low of May, which is, low traffic in April for obvious reasons. And 2021, just, going crazy. Everybody was buying everything. Then 2022 seems like more of a settling down. The first part of the year seemed to be a very busy time, maybe just kind of very similar to end of 2021. But now we're seeing a settling down in the marketplace for number of units sold. So for the people, look, I think if you're not buying or selling, if you're buying and selling, this is useful information, right? And if you're not buying and selling, then this is actually still useful information, because now you can say, like, did you watch this Glenn Stein guy from Realty Executives? Like, encourage people to watch this, because this is like straight from MLS, real numbers, not me trying to, fluff it up and say, hey, it's a great time to buy, or it's a great time to sell, or blah, 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 which I think it actually is in this particular window of opportunity. I think it actually is a really good time to buy and sell from this standpoint. If you don't have to sell, if you don't have to buy, maybe don't do either. But from a selling standpoint, remember, and we've talked about this in past videos, where the peak of the market was probably 4 months ago. Actually, back in March of this year seemed to be a lot of the peak, even though the average sales price is still going up. That's a little bit deceiving. And I won't get into that. But my point is that we're a little bit off the peak of the marketplace if you're a seller. So if the peak was here and we're here now, right? We're in this range here. Remember, based on what I just showed you on that chart and that graph, 2017, 2018 numbers, as far as average sales price is right here. So the average gardenia, the average Amarillo, the average Austin designer, whatever you have, right? It doesn't matter, Premier, it doesn't matter what you've got. Everything has gone up in price. So from a selling standpoint, it's still a really good time to sell. If you're thinking about waiting, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say if it's going to be better or worse. Who would predict that in the last couple of weeks the market would actually pick up speed, as opposed to a lot of people like, oh my gosh, doom and gloom, the world's coming to an end, run for the hills. And that's not the case. What we're seeing is less inventory this week, a little bit of a better market this week for sellers, slightly better than what it was a couple of weeks ago. A little bit, just because more sellers, more buyers came into the marketplace than sellers. And I'm going to show you those numbers in a minute. But from the buyer standpoint, okay, why buy now? Well, guess what? Interest rates are lowish. You've got less competition right now. Some people are like, wait, I'm going to wait until it bottoms out, which never works because nobody knows when the bottom is going to be. We didn't know that March was going to be the peak. Well, now we're looking at when's the bottom. Well, the bottom could be 3 years from now, could be next year, it could be now. We don't really know. So who knows? Just buy when you have to buy and sell when you have to sell. I think that's my recommendation. Quit trying to time stuff. That's not even how I do it myself. But let me share with you a particular, I want to look at some numbers on MLS that I think you're going to find really interesting, because this tells you what happened this week. I gave you some real, we looked at the macro, we looked at the long range view, and now we're looking at the short range view. And the short range view is 27 new listings over the last 7 days, right? I'm reading this from MLS, 27 new listings, price increases, four price increases, which is always fascinating to me. And then price decreases 31. We've seen a lot of that number, like new listings. That's a little bit light, a little bit. Like my preference would be in the 30s. I'd like to see more inventory because, as we've talked about before, our usual inventory is like in the 300 to 400 range. We're like 220, right? We're in that, or 218. We're in that low range. So like to see a little bit more price decreases. We've been in that, pretty much in that parameter, like in the 30s, pretty consistently for the last 4 or 5 months, like lots of price decreases ever since the market kind of shifted. Back on the market for, meaning properties that, they had a contract and then fell apart, then whatever happened, didn't come together, bad inspection, whatever. And then sold 25, meaning 25 closings, which is low, but that's also an indication of the traffic we're seeing in July, or we saw in July. So open house traffic was really light in July. Plus, it was incredibly hot. It's still hot, but it seems to be, we're pretty much getting closer to that point where it's going to cool off. And then, we're getting a lot of calls for rentals right now. A lot of people looking for seasonal, a lot of people looking for long-term. So if you have that, or if you have a home you want to put in our property management, email me, call me, let me know if you've got that, because we do need more properties there. Expireds, 2 expired listings, meaning the properties that didn't sell. Which doesn't surprise me. We're seeing more days on market, longer time period, taking a little bit longer for the properties that are not in perfect shape or overpriced, or both. Properties that are in really good shape, then, they're selling fast. 41 pendings is the number I want to share with you. 41 pendings. That is the largest number we've seen in a bit. And that's why we're seeing less and less inventory. So that's the story for this week. If you have questions, let me know. That's the story. We're going to have more information, but it's definitely a reversal in the marketplace. Definitely a reversal. Mr. McCray, the Village being a destination most likely won't have much of a drop as most of the country. Yes. And I think that's right. Even in the worst of times back in 2008, inventory, even 15% depreciation in the 2008, 2009 real estate market crash. I would expect I think we're going to see a little bit of, maybe 5 to 10% depreciation is possible. It's possible. We don't know. So maybe a little bit, but not as much as the rest of the country. So that's a good point. So hope everybody has a great weekend. And also remember, we've got a fundraiser if you're interested. If you know someone that has ever been affected by Alzheimer's, I believe it's November 12th. We're having a masquerade. It's going to be a formal event. And if you want to buy tickets, let me know, email me, and we'll get you hooked up. All right. Take care.